In the summer of 1858, London, the most powerful city on earth, was brought to its knees by something invisible. The smell of its own filth. The River Thames, the heart of the empire, had become a bubbling, festering river of death. The stench was so overpowering that Parliament fled its chambers, and people walked the streets with masks soaked in lime, desperately trying to filter the air they breathed. It was a crisis that would change our world forever, and the story of how it happened is almost too unbelievable to be true. Let's rewind to Victorian London. By the mid-19th century, it was the largest, wealthiest city in the world, with a booming population of 2.5 million people. But beneath the grand architecture and bustling streets lurked a dark and disgusting secret. London had no proper sewage system. Imagine over 200,000 cesspits, essentially underground pits of human waste, located in the basements and gardens of homes. When they overflowed, which they always did, the raw sewage would seep into cellars or spill directly onto the streets. The job of emptying these pits fell to men known as night soil men, who would shovel the waste by hand, cart it away, and dump it right into the nearest tributary of the Thames. For centuries, the River Thames had been London's toilet. Every street, every house, every factory dumped its waste into the same river that people were still drawing their drinking water from. This was a ticking time bomb. Cholera, a deadly waterborne disease, had already ravaged the city. Between 1848 and 1849, an outbreak killed over 14,000 people. In 1854, another 10,000 died, but at the time, no one understood how it spread. The prevailing scientific belief was the miasma theory, the idea that disease was carried by bad smells, or miasmas. And in London, the smell was everywhere. The wealthy could escape to their country estates, but for the poor living in crowded slums, there was no escape. Yet, as the city would soon learn, no one was truly safe. Then came the summer of 1858. An unprecedented heatwave descended on the city. Temperatures soared, and a severe drought caused the water level of the Thames to drop dramatically. It was the perfect storm. The blistering heat began to bake the centuries of accumulated human and industrial waste that coated the riverbanks. As the water level fell, raw sewage that was normally diluted and carried out to sea just sat there, festering under the sun. The result was a stench so powerful, so vile, that it became known as the Great Stink. It was described as a combination of rotten eggs, decay, and pure filth. People started vomiting in the streets just from the smell alone. In the Houses of Parliament, right on the riverbank, the situation became unbearable. Officials desperately hung curtains soaked in chloride of lime over the windows, but it did nothing. Members of Parliament would literally run from the building, handkerchiefs pressed to their faces, unable to legislate through the nauseating fog. Court proceedings were suspended. Riverboat cruises were abandoned. For the first time, the wealthy elite of London were getting a full sensory experience of the conditions the poor had endured for decades. Newspapers called the smell pestilential and nauseating beyond description. The river itself was dying. Fish went belly up by the thousands, their corpses floating in the toxic stew. Boatmen, hardened by years on the water, refused to work. The fear of another cholera epidemic gripped the city. The Great Stink wasn't just a health crisis. It was a moment of profound national humiliation. The greatest city in the world was literally choking on its own waste. But crisis creates opportunity, and in this moment of desperation, one man stepped forward. His name was Joseph Bazalgette, the chief engineer for London's Metropolitan Board of Works. For years, Bazalgette had been warning politicians about the impending disaster and pushing for a radical reform of the city's sewers. He had plans, detailed and brilliant, but they were consistently ignored as too expensive and too ambitious. The Great Stink was the political leverage he needed. Bazalgette's plan was revolutionary. He proposed creating a massive, underground network of intercepting sewers, over 1,000 miles of them. These sewers would catch the waste before it ever reached the Thames within the city limits. Using the power of gravity, the system would channel the sewage eastward, far downriver, past London, where it could be safely discharged into the sea on the ebb tide. The scale was immense. It required building huge new embankments along the river, which would not only house the main sewer lines, but also create new public land and roadways, reshaping London's waterfront forever. Faced with a city on the verge of collapse, Parliament finally acted. In a stunning display of speed, they passed the necessary legislation in just 18 days. A budget of £3 million, the equivalent of over £400 million today, was approved almost overnight. The bureaucratic gridlock was shattered by the sheer force of the stench. Wheaton Moan's construction began. It was a race against the next summer. The project was an engineering marvel. For the next 7 years, thousands of workers toiled beneath the streets of a living, breathing city. They dug tunnels through treacherous ground, navigated a maze of existing pipes and foundations, and laid millions of bricks. They created the Victoria, Albert, and Chelsea embankments, iconic features of London today, that were born from a sanitation crisis. Most of this incredible infrastructure remains hidden, a silent guardian beneath the feet of millions of Londoners who have no idea it est even there. The results were immediate and transformative. The last major cholera outbreak in London occurred in 1866, while the sewer system was still under construction and hadn't yet reached certain areas. After that, the disease was virtually eliminated from the city. Life expectancy soared. The Thames, slowly but surely, began to recover. And here's the most amazing part. Joseph Bazalgette didn't just build for his time. He famously said, "Well, we're only going to do this once, and there's always the unforeseen." So he doubled the diameter of the pipes he had calculated was necessary. Because of his incredible foresight, his Victorian-era sewer system is still in operation today, serving a city that has more than quadrupled in population. The legacy of the Great Stink went far beyond London. Bazalgette's system became the blueprint for modern sanitation across the globe. Cities like Paris, New York, and Berlin all copied his model. It was the birth of modern urban planning, proving that public health is directly tied to public infrastructure. The suffering of one terrible summer helped establish sanitation as a fundamental human right. So, why does this 160-year-old story matter now? Because we're seeing the same patterns repeat. We face global crises, from climate change to aging infrastructure, that threaten our cities. We often neglect these massive, unglamorous problems until disaster strikes. Think of the Flint water crisis, or cities unprepared for catastrophic flooding or extreme heat waves. We wait for the great stink moment before we are forced to act. Bazalgette's genius was not just in his engineering, but in his long-term thinking. He built for a future he couldn't see. Today, even his system is overwhelmed, and London is once again facing issues with sewage polluting the Thames. The Great Stink taught us a vital lesson. Prevention is always cheaper and better than a cure forced by catastrophe. It took the worst summer in London's history to build a system that saved millions of lives and redefined the modern city. It proved that sometimes you have to hit rock bottom before you can build your way out. It leaves us with a critical question. What invisible crises are we ignoring today that future generations will look back on and wonder why we didn't act sooner? What modern infrastructure crisis do you think we're dangerously overlooking? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and if you enjoyed this story, be sure to like and subscribe for more dives into the history that shaped our world.